First winter weather in the spring is getting really cold. It's a good thing you and I are indoors, Luke.
Yeah.
Carson Field, Luke Zahlmann. This is the Gazette Preps podcast for spring Soundoff. And Luke, it's a busy time. Some state events coming to an end. I know we talked about we're going to start rolling out those peak performers very soon. So
Yep.
it's a fun time to be covering high school sports here in the springs. And state cross country is one that happens this weekend. You're going to be out there Friday and Saturday, or is it just Saturday?
It's just Saturday. Yep.
Okay.
It'll be chock full, but I think what's funny is despite how many people run, despite how many classifications, it actually goes pretty fast.
Okay.
Just in, because obviously an entire classification, girls will go and then boys will go. So it actually ends up being a pretty quick event.
They're pretty fast kids.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal, I guess. So, it's fun. It's fast paced. It's a fun event. So it's cool that it's also local. All these kids get to go where they train. So it's always a fun time, and it's one of the spring's most dominant sports. So.
Well, I helped you round out some of the results from regionals. Man, there were so many teams from the area that put together really good performances. Going into state, who do you see as some of the top team contenders?
So, and I put this as the lead in one of my articles. It's death, taxes, and TCA boys winning state. I mean, they're once again positioned. Don't get me wrong. There's some other groups that are pretty good, but when you have the returning individual champion and then Chandler Wilburn, a senior who ended up beating Matt Edwards, the returning champion, ended up beating him in almost all the events they raced together. That's pretty great. And then you have them qualify a perfect score in regionals. They take first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth.
It's crazy.
They're pretty well positioned. So they're looking like they could bring home an 8th title. And then surprisingly, despite their jump up, Air Academy girls, last year they were pretty good in 4A, had a pretty good finish, but one I know that they were hoping would be a little higher up. Well, now they moved to 5A and they've gotten better seemingly. I mean, you have Bethany Michalik, who won her 5A regional. You have Tessa right behind her, Emily Beers, familiar name to Sam Beers, being siblings. So they're going to be a pretty big contender in 5A. You've got it's the same names as most sports, but they're going to have to beat out Valor, Cherry Creek, and then Arapahoe. Cherry Creek and Arapahoe, having won each of the last 4 kind of respectively. And so it'll be a tough road for Air Academy girls, but I feel like they have a really good group. And on top of that, they return pretty much the entire team next year. So having a bunch of success this year could bode well for next year. And heck, if they're able to win it, you have an opportunity to repeat next year, which is always, I think, the goal. So those are the 2 biggest ones, I think, as if you're going in and you say, okay, who's the dominant one? Last year was Cheyenne Mountain boys, TCA boys and girls. This year it's TCA boys again, and then Air Academy girls.
There were also, in addition to some of those strong team performances, some gold medals from some of the individuals at the regional meets. Just individually, who stands out to you?
So I brought them up a little bit, but Matt Edwards and Chandler Wilburn, if one of them wins the individual title, I don't think it will surprise anyone. Chandler has been setting the course on fire this year. He's really stepped up, and I think it started at track last year. He did really well in the long distance runs after not a disappointing cross-country season by any means, but I think you've seen this gradual progression for him. And so I think now he's really on top of the world. And like I said, he's beaten Matt Edwards in a couple of events, but last year Matt Edwards came into the state finals kind of not as the favorite. He had done okay. He had 2 top finishes. He had done all right, but then he beats the field by almost a minute at state. So he's one of those that kind of sneaks up, gradually gets better, and then at state you usually see his best. So those are 2 huge ones for the boys. And like I said, Bethany Michalik, she won her regional. She's done really well this year. She's beaten some of the top runners in the state, both at events they were at and just from times comparing them across the board. And then Nadia Campos, she leads this, I believe she leads 2A with her top time by almost a full minute. So she's coming off of winning it as a freshman last year. And that time she won it with, she's already a minute better than that time this year. So I think she's going to be looking for that 4 for 4, that 4-peat in sophomore year. Obviously, you got to get that one. So she's she is really in the driver's seat for that 2A girls title. So I could really see her running away with that one. Not to make any too many cross country puns, but I think she'll be kind of at the top of the field.
Soccer also starting its postseason this weekend, and who do you just see as some of the best team contenders there?
So Cheyenne Mountain is our biggest one, number 3 seed in 4A. And what I liked is when they got seeded, they got a pretty good side of the bracket. And we had even reached out to the coaching staff there about, hey, let's get a little feature story about the team. And they said, no, we're gonna focus on the tournament. We're gonna focus on I mean, when you're doing that as a high school team, I think that really shows just the laser focus that they have on this thing. And so they're in a good spot. Rampart as the 10 seed in 5A, they also got a decent bracket spot. I think if they can make it through their portion of the bracket, they're really looking good. They have one of the better games of the weekend in Columbine, which when you compare attendance of those two schools, it's kind of crazy that they're going to play each other, but Rampart will be the higher seed. They've gotten just better and better throughout the year. Coach Anderson there really has them rolling. So, I think those are kind of two of the main ones. And then you also have the TCAs of the world, the Air Academies. TCA, it's like I think what hurts them every now and then, especially in RPI, is they play in a league that's 3A and 4A. So sometimes they're playing teams that don't help their RPI very much, which explains why they have a 12 seed despite going, only 2 losses, 1 tie. And then that Air Academy team, I mean, in their last 11, they either tied or won. So I saw them earlier in the year. They were finding ways to win. And then they just went on this run to end the year. And so I think momentum's a big thing in soccer. And I think, their matchup, I think they could do really well this year. And then we've talked about them a bunch of times. Thomas McLaren in 2A. Yeah. They're the 3 seed. It's a smaller tournament in the 2A. I believe there's only 16 teams. So less of a road to get there than the other classifications. And I think it bodes well for them. The third round would be where it would get toughest, but obviously you got to get to the third round. But I think they feel good going into that.
As far as first round matchups go, which ones are you most excited for?
So the Rampart Columbine one is a huge matchup. And then TCA and Eagle Valley should be a really good game. You have a 12 seed against a 21 seed. That should bode for a pretty good result. I think it's two teams that really aren't used to playing each other, which always adds to the intrigue a little bit. And then TCA in a night game, it's a very fun field. That soccer community, the players, the coaches, everyone, they really get up for that. So that should be a really fun first round game.
And then, I mean, just looking ahead, what do you think are the overall chances that there's a home champion from the Pikes Peak region at Widener Field?
So it would be really cool, wouldn't it, to see them right down the road from, wherever they end up practicing, whether it be a Cheyenne Mountain, a Thomas McLaren, whoever it may be. I would say if I had to pick a favorite, it's probably Cheyenne Mountain and Air Academy. I think that they're both positioned really well with experienced teams that can win a lot of different ways. And so I think they're probably in the driver's seat. I think Cheyenne Mountain got a pretty good draw in the first round. So I think that they'll be able to advance. But last year they were also a top seed, and the goal scoring really, really came to light for them, both in the way they were holding other teams. They still were able to in the playoffs, but their lack of goal scoring last year, I think, really hurt them. So this year, I think they have a little bit better of an offensive plan, and I think they're positioned really well to maybe capture that 4A title.
And then obviously football never really slows down, but the postseason's looming there. Just as the season does slow down just a little bit, what are your overall takeaways, just big picture things you've seen this year?
So I think it's crazy. My two biggest takeaways are almost juxtapositions for each other, because the passing game in Colorado Springs has grown immensely. I mean, whether that be, kind of because of, passers like a Braden Dorman, like a Tavian, whether it be those veteran QBs we have, or if it's just a change of scheme, the passing game's been crazy this year. I mean, Colorado Springs has 6 of the top 10 receivers, and it's not even just from the Vista Ridges, the top schools. You have one from Sierra, you have one from Palmer, you have guys that are stepping up, Cheyenne Mountain. You have guys that are stepping up even at the smaller schools and putting up really big stats, which I think really speaks to how the passing game has grown. But what I've also noticed is the hard-hitting teams tend to be boding very well this year. You have Palmer Ridge 9-0. You have Pine Creek rolling. You have Fountain Fort Carson doing really well. I mean, we touched on that game quite a bit when they played each other, of just how aggressive and how hard-hitting that game was. And it really came to light for me in the Rampart Cheyenne Mountain game. Two pretty evenly matched teams, Well, it was super cold that night. It's going to be super cold this weekend for our big game. And I think in those cold games, you really start to see the team that wants to hit the hardest tends to come away. And so the hitting and the passing game have just gone to a new level, even since I was in high school here. So it's been really cool to watch the evolution of football here.
One of our most anticipated games for the season, Vista Ridge, Palmer Ridge. I mean, that's going to be a very good game. Two very good football teams. Just what are your overall thoughts about that? How do you see it shaking out?
So, and this is what we thought going into it last year too. It was Palmer Ridge, Vista Ridge. You have two of the top teams, one a super high flying team in Vista Ridge, one in Palmer Ridge who tends to run the ball really well, play really well defensively. Well, then it ended up being 41-0 Bears. So I think it's going to be closer this year. And that was Vista Ridge's worst loss this year. So it was kind of an anomaly even last year. And this year they're obviously not losing 41-0 games. But I think the Ponderosa game is a pretty good comparison. When Pondo came to Palmer Ridge, they had a top passer, a top passing game. And Palmer Ridge, I mean, yes, the score got run up a little bit with Ponderosa's side, but that was with Palmer Ridge dropping a couple interceptions that were you never want to call an interception an easy interception, but there are a couple that I'm sure when they watched on film, they were gritting teeth a little bit. So I think that Palmer Ridge I would think they're gonna come through with the same plan. I didn't want to talk X's and O's with Mike yesterday when I talked to him, but if I had to guess, they'll probably come in with a similar game plan of limiting the running game and trying to get pressure on Dorman, because last year 17 rushing yards for the Wolves. That was it, which obviously in a lopsided game, you're not going to run the ball as much, but Braden also only had 170 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Weather's going to come into play. I was talking to you and Brett about it. It's going to be a cold one. I think around kickoff, it's going to be almost freezing. By halftime, it probably will be freezing. And so up on that hill at Vista Ridge, it's going to be a really chilly game. So I'll be curious to see how that affects the passing game of Vista Ridge, because Palmer Ridge, that plays right into their hands. They like to hit hard. They have a lot of real gritty offensive linemen and 2 really good tailbacks, as well as a quarterback who runs. So that does play into their hands a little bit, but it's not like this is Vista Ridge's first cold game ever. They'll practice in it all week. It's been chilly all week from what we've seen.
Sure.
So they'll practice in it. They'll be prepared for it. But I think the formula is going to be similar. It's just going to be how that bodes for both teams in kind of, okay, with the adjustments that they've been able to make from last year.
And then we look at the smaller schools. TCA is a team that's just been great this year. This is arguably their biggest game of the year against Elizabeth on the road this week. What does TCA need to do to win?
So they're going to need to limit the rushing game. Elizabeth likes to run the ball. They're not a very big passing team, but that's been no problem for TCA this year. I mean, you're talking in their 8-0 season, they've allowed 6 points a game. Well, in the last 5, that includes a couple shutouts, they've allowed 3 points a game. So when you have, and we talk about it all the time, it's the underrated parts of football, defense and special teams, that they really succeed in, not only from a kicking, pointing standpoint, but from defending those things. They're blocking punts, blocking kicks. They're doing the things that not only can obviously change a scoreboard, but it can change the whole momentum. I mean, if you're in a tie game and you block a punt, return it for a touchdown, even if you don't return it from a touchdown, I almost think the momentum swing from that is bigger than, say, a 60-yard touchdown pass down the sideline. I think that it can really flip a game.
Sure.
And I think you've seen that with TCA. When they've gotten those big plays, you've seen the opponent almost wither a little bit and almost have to take a step back momentum-wise. So TCA Elizabeth is going to be just all about defense and special teams, I think. Even though both teams know how to score, both teams also know how to keep the other team from scoring. So on the road, I think TCA, when you have defense and special teams in a run game, that tends to travel pretty well no matter what field you're at. So I think TCA should come away with that, but those are going to kind of be the keys for them, I think, in being able to come through with that one.
Luke, before you go, I want to talk a little bit about volleyball. They have the pre-state tournament here in Colorado Springs this week. That'll be very interesting. Just overall, what's the importance of that, and how could it be a learning experience for some teams?
So I love that they're going to do this. I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to be called the Colorado Invitational. It's going to be a huge team. They're bringing the tops though. It's not necessarily like you would normally see from a volleyball team where it's, okay, come one, come all. We want to get as many teams as possible. No, you're talking top 7 in 5A, top 7 in 4A, top 2 in 3A, and then there's some locals in the pool. You got Cheyenne Mountain, who, despite a down year, I think can bring a punch whenever they're in there. Coronado, Doherty, Air Academy. So you have a couple smaller teams, but I think when you have those type of titans in one arena at one time, it's going to be a blast.
It is.
When you're talking top 7 in 5A and 4A, those are some of the best programs, not only in Colorado, but in this region of the country. So
absolutely.
It's going to be a blast to see that. And I think it's a fun preparation because these are teams they're going to see at the state tournament. So you're going to get to see, okay, how are they going to block against us? How's their defensive scheme going to be against us? What kind of hitting are they going to try to attack us with? You're going to get a little preview of that. A lot of these teams have already played each other this year, but you're going to see, for one, how that affects this second matchup. And then you're going to get, okay, now we have 2 matches of film that we can bring to a state tournament against each other. And you're going to get the cross of classifications. You're going to have the Palmer Ridges playing the Cherry Creeks, the Valors playing the Woodland Parks. I mean, matchups you really wouldn't see during the year, which is going to be just a really fun time. And, I think they had originally planned to have the state tournament at the World Arena. That's what all of this was based around. It got moved to the Coliseum, which I think was a little bit of a bummer for this. But now it's like, okay, you'll get one tournament on Colorado Springs turf, and then you'll get the next tournament on Denver turf.
Yeah, so that's cool.
That's a really fun angle of how this all works.
Which teams do you think have the most to prove here? Which ones do you think could really use this to improve?
So I think Rampart, just from talking to Bree this week when we did the peak performer with Ava, I think she was really disappointed about how the team played. And it was early. You're still adjusting to a new coach. You're integrating Ava. You lost 7 seniors. There's all these different things that are going on. But I think even with all that said, she was a little disappointed how her team played early in the year versus Thompson Valley versus Palmer Ridge. And if they get to the second round and Thompson Valley gets to the second round, they'll get an opportunity against Thompson Valley again, a team that has not lost a set all year. This is a 5A, 4A matchup. So I think they'd like to prove that this 14-match win streak they had after that tough slate was more indicative of who they are than some of those early struggles. And then you have Palmer Ridge. Their only loss all year was Valor. But I think they'll also want to prove, and maybe they'll get a chance to play Valor. The only way that would happen, I believe, the way the bracket shakes out, would be in a title match. So you'd have the top 5A team against the top 4A team in a title match. And that would be a blast because at the state tournament, you're not going to get to see it. It's completely classification dependent. So you wouldn't get to see it. And I think that would be really cool. They might get to play Cherry Creek in the second round. So you might see a tournament where a team like Palmer Ridge that's only lost 5 sets in their last 18 wins, they might get to play both Cherry Creek and Valor in this tournament. And heck, if they're able to win it, they will have downed 2 of the best teams in 5A along the way. So if Palmer Ridge can come out of this as the champion, I think you're feeling great about their state title odds.
Busy time to be an athlete, coach, fan, sports reporter, really anybody involved with sports here in Colorado Springs. But I know we both have outdoor assignments the next few days, so we're going to try to stay warm. We hope you guys do too. Thank you so much for watching Spring Soundoff.